Thank you, Mark. אנחנו נמשיך ברצף בפאנל שיעסוק בנושא סייבר סקיוריטי. הפאנל יהיה בהנחיה של אלוף משנה במילואים רם דור, כיום מנכ"ל RDeye ולשעבר רמ"ח ביטחון מידע בצה"ל. רם הוא קצין מודיעין בכיר, את רוב שירותו הוא מילא בתפקידי מודיעין ביחידות מבצעיות הפועלות בזירות לחימה. יש לו ניסיון רב במדיניות נגד טרור, לוחמת סייבר ואבטחת מידע. בשנת 2009 הוא הצטרף לצוות של רונטל Engineering Solutions, וב-2010 ייסד את RDeye Integrated Security Solution. אני מזמין את רם להציג את יתר חברי הפאנל.
צהריים טובים. אני שמח להיות פה. נשארו המעטים החטובים. הסשן הזה הוא יהיה באנגלית. In a moment I'll move to English. Once I will introduce the members of the panel. מהפאנל הזה יחסיר חבר יקר מחברת החשמל שהודיע לנו אתמול שלאור האירועים בחברת החשמל ומה שאנחנו כולנו חווים, הוא נאלץ להישאר במשימתו. חשבתי להתחיל באיזה בדיחה על חברת חשמל, אבל כנראה שזה כבר לא בדיחות, כנראה שזה הכל אמת. אז מפה אנחנו נעבור ישר לפאנל, ואני אציג ויזמין את החברים שהשתתפו בפאנל. And I would please to introduce Mr. Mark Finnick, that you already heard his very interesting presentation. Mark, please. While you're coming up, I will say that personally I'm very happy about what you said about the CISO and the place he takes on the table, because I remember, it reminds me, when I was the CISO from the Army, I was always intense with commanders, where is the position of the CISO? How do you want me to help you and protect leaking of information and securing in special operation without knowing that the special operation is really happening? So I'm really happy with what you said, and you brought a very tough and interesting issue in your presentation. Thank you. Our next guest is going to be Professor Yuval Elovich. Yuval is the director of the Telecom Innovation Laboratories at Ben-Gurion University and associate professor at the Department of Information System Engineering of Ben-Gurion University. He holds a BSc and MSc degree in computer electrical engineering from the Ben-Gurion University and a PhD in information system from Tel Aviv University. In the last 7 years, he is leading the collaboration between Ben-Gurion University and Deutsche Telekom Labs. Last but not least, I will ask Mr. Doron Davidson, which is right now is one of the co-founder and VP for Business Development of C5I. Doron carries 15 years and more of experience in the information security and cybersecurity. He was one of the senior management member of RSA in EMEA in his previous duty, and he is going to be as the younger guy bringing us the technology perspective and many other things. And after I was introducing, I will choose to stand over here. It's okay with you guys. The topics that I choose to speak about is how current changes and evaluation of cyber battlefield becoming in a big change in the last few years since, as we heard Mr. Brandt this morning, there's a lot of possibility of attackers coming into the game. And I also heard the General Danny Bren speaking about a kind of proliferation in cyber, which means tools that were only in the hand of government agencies becoming more and more in the hand of private, small organization. And so come the targets are changing, and there's a big change in that kind of battlefield. I would just quote that recently the FBI has announced that cybercrime is the biggest law enforcement crime in nowadays. And when we think about crime, we all think about drugs, armed robbery, things like that. But actually, cybercrime is the most common law enforcement crime. My first question would be to Professor Yuval, which comes from the academy and with many years of experience, about what kind of changes, if there are in that kind of the battlefield in the sense of how I would say the attacker is organized, how the attacks looks like, and in any other ways that you can see the changes in that kind of battlefield. Please, Yuval.
Yes, I will focus only on two aspects about the changes in the cybersecurity battlefield. First of all, there is a tendency in organizations to move from prevention to detection, as if everybody believes that actually we cannot prevent cyber attacks, and we assume that actually there is an attack in progress inside the organization. And then what organizations try to do using new technologies that are being developed by many, many companies, try to detect the attack as they are running inside the organization. The biggest problem with this approach is that actually in detection, you need the attack to be running inside the organization, and actually there is some kind of damage that is already created by the attack. If you manage to attack it at a very early stage, then it's very close to prevention. But if actually the attack is being detected at later stage, maybe a lot of information was already leaked from the organization, or maybe the attack will even disappear before you manage to detect exactly what happened. That's the first change in the battlefield. The second change, while focusing more on the attackers, is the attacker, while knowing that there are so many technologies inside organizations trying to detect them, while trying to hide in unprotected areas. For example, in IoTs. IoTs today, and there are many, many IoTs inside the organizations, are not protected. We can't run, today at least, a very advanced cybersecurity solutions inside IoTs. So this is a perfect place for the attacker to rest and to put their code and to maintain persistence inside the organization. In addition, what attackers try to do is to run in an unprotected area that are not exactly IoTs, are embedded parts. For example, there was a very, very famous cyber attack where the malware was running inside the firmware of the hard drive. Again, it's in an area that nobody is looking for a malware, and there a malware can scan all the content of the hard drive without being detected. These are two examples from an attacker's perspective and from a defense perspective.
Thank you. Unexpectedly, Mark, I would like to hear your comment about it, since part of what you're in charge and specialize is the endpoint security. Yes. And what Yuval represent, and that since there's a big change in what is happening, how do you empower what's happening in the endpoint and going from there to the threat protection and to other area, which you should, as a company and as someone who is running a kind of campaign for their defenders, should go from the endpoint to the, I would call it beyond the firewall.
Yeah, so I totally agree with you. The world we used to live in is a lot different, where you're able to delineate between prevent, detect, and now respond, because a lot of organizations are struggling with, all right, I have a good rear view mirror, I know what happened, well, what do I do about that? This is a challenge for organizations. There's executives that don't get fired because they have a good rear view mirror and they're able to explain what happened, when in fact what they should have is some sort of remediation tool. So I think that one of the things that we're starting to see changing, and you mentioned IoTs. Within IoTs, there are absolutely ways that you can secure the data that's centered and feeding IoTs and being fed by IoTs. And I think that's important, is to work at that level. I think that an organization right now, most organizations truly struggle with the fact that they have different organizations in the business. Security, for example, identifies vulnerabilities, and then in many cases they submit it to a change management organization for operations to fix. There's a gap of time there. We need to compress that gap so that either they're working together, these two organizations, as one, or security teams have endpoint detect and respond technologies where they can fix it immediately. I think that the biggest change that we will see is not going to be technology, but truly organizational in nature. Most organizations, security operations groups, are not set up to address the malware that we currently face.
Thank you, Mark, because it helps me move to the next question. Since this morning, and we've seen that there is I would call it a change in the nature of war. This is an essay that we used to use when we were thinking about the regular war, when you move troops from side to side. But like the technology is going faster, the nature of war here is getting faster and faster. There's a big change in that kind of war. So like in this morning, I've heard the essays like more agile, more rapidly, more elusive attacks to different target, to different means of offense. And that's a kind of a wake-up call for us as defenders to maybe to challenge those kind of changes with creating new methods, new technology, which brings something new into the battlefield. We all know that the attackers is almost always ahead of us. But how can we catch them? How can we maybe ahead of them? And I like to address this question to Doron to hear some new ideas of being ahead of the threat.
Sure, thank you. So first of all, it's quite interesting to be here and see this interest, and it's part of what's happening. The interest that is not just for security people, but rather on the board level, in every organization, they have a growing interest to understand what's actually attacking them. And up until about a year ago when I actually founded C5I, I was working at RSA and I was helping organizations build their security operations centers. And what I've noticed is that in the majority of the attacks that we've seen, over 90% of them, they've had the breadcrumbs, they've had the hints within the system, alerts coming from the different detection systems that could have alerted them about an attack that is actually ongoing. And you can see that at the endpoint, you can see that on the network security itself. And the kind of change in paradigm is that it's not enough now to have the right detection systems. And we are talking about organizations that spend millions of dollars on the right detection systems. The problem today is how do you know, as a security analyst sitting within the security operations center, that one, you're investigating the right thing, that an alert that you're looking at, that you understand the business impact of that alert on your organization, and by the way, have I seen the right alert? Because it's one out of hundreds, thousands, and in cases like we've heard about Sony and Target and Ashley Madison, there were hundreds of thousands of alerts every single day. How do I, as an analyst, know that I'm looking at the right thing? Now, on the other side, attackers, they learn about anomaly detection, about all these great systems that we've put out as an industry, and they now know how to mimic a baseline. So suddenly, a simple anomaly detection is not enough. What we actually need, and that's the kind of change in perception, one, have better visibility for management, but two, have better visibility for the analyst within the security operations center. How do we connect the different attacks, the different alerts and events coming from the outside world into my organization so that I as an analyst can better understand, investigate, and then mitigate, and doing all of that in minutes rather than hours. And I think you mentioned that it's years, and years that it takes today, and we need to do that in minutes because data is leaking out.
Thank you, Doron. I think that part of your question was also a comment on things that Mark has previously showed about the time frame of reacting on certain acts. And I want to address this question again to Yuval, since you were talking about a specific problem to a certain area, Doron, and I believe, and I put my comments here, that we have many startups here, and in the last few years I've seen many products for many problems, but a solution which gives you a comprehensive answer is something that is unlike to look for. So if you will combine all those small solutions into a greater shield, maybe we can have a stronger shield against those attackers. Maybe if we can take and enlarge the word intelligence, which we all, in the sense of cyber, think about the things that we collect inside the organization, take it into the area where there's something else happening, like Mark was showing in his slides, what happened in Darknet, how much information they are gathering there, how much information you can harvest from there to understand if you're a kind of a target. So Yuval, I want to hear about new approaches, new concept, how to build this stronger shield.
Yes, I want to focus on your core question, which was, what are the challenges? And I want to focus on one challenge from the attackers and one challenge for the defenders. First of all, the main challenge for the attackers today is not exactly the anomaly detection systems, but the next generation, which is deception system and moving target defense. That's a huge challenge for the attacker. By the way, sometimes it's also a huge challenge for the defender, because even I don't know exactly how my organization looks like, because we are constantly changing it, so the attacker will not be able to benefit from any internal reconnaissance that he did in the past. But that's the first challenge for the attackers. The other challenge, a huge challenge in my opinion for the defenders, is that today most of the security solutions that we are putting in place are based on some kind of data that is being collected and monitored inside the organization. For example, all the domain of big data security analytics. The assumption behind big data security analytics is that whatever I have in the big data is correct and trusted. But what the attacker can do is compromise the collection. And once they compromise the collection of data, any insight that I would try to deduce from the data in the big data is meaningless. And that's a huge challenge for the defenders, how to collect meaningful data in a trusted manner.
Well, I'm very happy with the point of deception that you were adding, because as an integrator, from time to time, and as a CISO perspective point of view, when you meet an organization and you ask him, how is your security, cybersecurity looks like, so he usually shows you a kind of an architecture which starts, well, I have a firewall, and from there I have certain tools inside. So, and he shows you usually a kind of circles, how it's going deeper and deeper and deeper inside, but no one is going beyond that firewall. So if you will add the deception point, and that text will go somewhere beyond the firewall, and you have more intelligence beyond the firewall with what's happening, because we know when there's someone carrying an attack, he should ask, what is your, if it's a kind of a phishing, why would you like that kind of link to open? Because you're interested in some kind of subject. There's a lot of socialism, social engineering inside that kind of an act. So if you can find those collecting information before the attack is occurring, and you add it to the deception, so you added 2 circles more that are giving a new challenge to the attacker, and I'm happy with that. And I want to go to my third question, which is the challenge for the CISO. And I will hook it into the C5I conference we have had here, since there's a lot of tense in between the CISO, the CIO, the IT managers. Is it any changes or any challenges in the organization level once the organization have to confront or build a new campaign against those kinds of attacks? Is there any new tense in between those CIO and CISO? Where should be on the organigram of the organization should be placed next to the CFO, next to the CEO, together with the CIO? I really like to hear what Mark have to say about it, because you gave a very interesting phrase in your presentation, and I know you have your perspective about it coming from a very big organization.
It's a very, very timely question. So here's my perspective. When the CIO became a prominent force in an organization, there was 20, 30 years of history, and they were brought in to solve problems that everybody knew about. It was called automation, right? To a large degree, that's what a CIO
That's okay.
was responsible
finish your
for.
answer.
I thought it was the fire alarm, sorry. With a CISO, there's no history. Every day is a new adventure. Every day is some brand new, much smarter, better funded, bad person who is intending to do very bad things. You cannot underestimate what hackers are trying to do today. It may very well be as innocuous as listening to what a construction manufacturer does in a state that doesn't have that technology and then building inferior product, to literally controlling nuclear weapons, airplanes, The other thing that you don't have are vendors. I'm glad you mentioned the startups. It's wonderful that we've got innovation. It's wonderful that you've got companies, candidly, like IBM to consume these technologies. This is good. We have a lot of money to bring these technologies to market. You know what the challenge is with some of the newer vendors, though? They're making claims that their new ways to do things are as safe as the old ways. And I'll give you a good example. I have a customer right now in the federal government who brought in a technology based on peer-to-peer architectures. And they get a lot of advertisements and they get a lot of publicity for this new architecture. And what we found is this same customer used this peer-to-peer architecture, and then a hacker used that same product to move malware and traverse it from machine to machine to machine. So the same $10 million that was used to buy a vendor's product was used to expedite the delivery of malware. My point in summary is this is all brand new. And this is why it's so important. This is why I had this slide about the analyst. This is a world where if you're not going to production customers, you're not going to, I mentioned the 50 government agencies in the States. If you're not going to customers who are using technologies to stop this, if you're not speaking to analysts and you're trying to be the first one to do this, there will be somebody to help you while you go do something else. Yeah?
Thank you, and thank you, members of the panel. I would say that if one of the goals of kind of a conference is sharing information, I'm sure that you brought a lot of experience into that meeting, and that's kind of a sharing of information. Thank you all, and for the brave one in the crowd that stayed our panel. Thank you.